The album Afterburner might be the moment ZZ Top stopped sounding like a Texas blues band and started sounding like the 1980s itself. If you love this record, you deserve to know whether that shift strengthened their legacy or quietly reshaped it forever. When the album landed in 1985, it felt enormous. The production was bigger, shinier, more mechanical, and for a lot of us in our teens or early 20s, it sounded modern in a way that felt exciting rather than suspicious. It sat next to copies of Eliminator and Tres Hombres and many others, but it didn't feel like it came from that same dusty highway. It felt like neon chrome and circuitry. That difference is exactly why we need to talk about it. Honestly, if you appreciate deep dives that respect the band but refuse to sugarcoat the evolution, subscribe now because this channel is built for fans who want to think as hard as they feel. The identity tension is real. Early ZZ Top was built on greasy riffs, space between the notes, and a kind of laid-back Texas swagger that felt effortless. Even Eliminator, for all its polish and MTV-friendly sheen, still carried a sense of organic groove under the surface. Afterburner tightens everything. Drums lock in near mechanical precision. The guitars are sculpted, compressed, sharpened. Low end is controlled instead of loose. Sounds engineered for maximum impact rather than captured in the room. And that shift did not begin with songwriting. It began with production philosophy. Take Sleeping Bag. The groove is hypnotic, but it leans heavily on programmed rhythm elements that remove some of the human push and pull. The tone is sleek, the edges are sanded down. It works in the context of mid-80s radio. But does not feel like three guys sweating under a stage in a small club. Rough Boy pushes even further into that atmosphere. It's cinematic, layered with synth textures and reverb that stretch the emotional space wide open. It's a strong composition, but the blues minimalism that once defined the band is buried under carefully constructed ambience. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The sound worked. Afterburner went multi-platinum, the singles charted, the videos dominated MTV rotation. The band expanded beyond rock and radio into mainstream pop culture visibility. From a commercial standpoint, doubling down on that 80s aesthetic was not a mistake. It was strategic. The decade rewarded spectacle and sonic density. Audiences expected polish. Producers competed to create the most impactful drum sounds and the brightest mixes. In that environment, subtlety often lost to scale. But commercial success forces the harder question about authenticity, because numbers cannot measure identity. Fans measure identity. And if you're watching this, you probably know someone who knows every track, every guitar tone shift, every lyrical turn. You can enjoy the hook of Velcro Fly while still sensing that something fundamental shifted beneath the surface. You can appreciate the confidence of the performances and still miss the looseness that once defined the band. That tension does not make you disloyal, it makes you perceptive. So what exactly changed at the core level? First, rhythm. Earlier records breathed, the tempo could feel elastic. On Afterburner, the rhythmic grid feels locked. Whether through drum machines, triggered sounds, or tight studio editing, the pulse rarely wavers. That gives the album driving consistency, but also removes some of the subtle imperfections that made earlier grooves feel alive. The human element becomes secondary to precision. Second, texture. The guitar tones are still recognizable, but they are framed differently. Instead of sitting raw and forward, they are integrated into a broader sonic architecture filled with synth pads and layered effects. The mix feels stacked vertically rather than spread horizontally. Silence, which once amplified swagger, is replaced by a sustained background energy. Third, aesthetic alignment in the decade. The mid-80s were a production arms race. Bigger drums, bigger high-end, gated reverbs, sequenced bass lines, digital processing everywhere. Rock bands faced a choice: adapt to the sonic expectations of the time or risk sounding outdated. Afterburner clearly chooses adaptation. It does not flirt with the era, it embraces it, and this is where the identity debate sharpens. Was the band chasing trends, or were they translating their style into the dominant language of the moment? If you strip away the reverb and synth layers, many of the songs still rely on groove-based riff structures and minimal chord movement. The songwriting DNA did not disappear, it was dressed differently. That distinction matters because losing identity is not the same as evolving presentation. At the same time, we cannot ignore how dramatically presentation influences perception. Sound is not just a container for songs, it shapes how we emotionally interpret them. When the production becomes glossy and high-tech, we subconsciously associate it with modernity rather than tradition. That shift alone can make longtime fans feel like something essential has been traded for accessibility. And yet, think back to when you first heard the album. For many of us, those tracks are wired to specific memories. Driving at night with the radio up, watching music videos on a small television, flipping through CD booklets while the disc spun on your new CD player. The production that now feels excessive once felt cutting edge. It felt current, it felt powerful. Nostalgia complicates our judgment because it fuses sound with personal history. This is why debate around Afterburner refuses to die. Not just about drum machines or synth lines, it's about what we expect from a band that defined part of our youth. We want continuity, we want evolution, we want authenticity, but we rarely agree on how those should balance. If we zoom out historically, the album begins to look less like betrayal and more like a survival strategy. The 1980s rewarded artists who scaled up their sound. Stadium tours demanded sonic weight, radio compression favored bright mixes, MTV valued visual and sonic spectacle. In that ecosystem, leaning into the era's production norms was not weakness, it was alignment. The real question becomes whether alignment erased essence. Listen closely and you still hear the attitude, the vocal delivery retains that understated cool. The guitar phrasing still carries blues inflection even when processed. The lyrical themes remain rooted in swagger, desire, and humor. The core personality did not vanish, it was filtered. For some listeners, that filter feels like enhancement. For others, it feels like obstruction. So did Afterburner lean too hard into the 80s sound? Yes, it absolutely leaned. It did not hold back. It embraced technology, polish, and radio-conscious structure with confidence. But leaning into a decade is not automatically the same as abandoning identity. Sometimes it is the cost of staying visible in a rapidly shifting landscape. What makes this album fascinating is that it captures a moment at a junction. It's the sound of a blues rock band negotiating with digital modernity. It's the sound of analog roots colliding with sequence precision. Not as raw as their early catalog and not as groundbreaking as Eliminator, but it's a document of transition, and that is where reconciliation happens. You do not have to pretend the production choices were subtle. They were not. You also do not have to dismiss the album as a sellout move. It was more complex than that. It was a calculated evolution shaped by cultural momentum and commercial reality. You can love the hooks, question the gloss, and still respect the strategic intelligence behind the shift. Afterburner is not the sound of a band forgetting who they were. It's the sound of a band choosing to survive the loudest decade in rock history by speaking its language fluently. The raw edges were polished, but the foundation was still there for those willing to listen beneath the sheen. If you want to hear my thoughts on Eliminator, this album right here, check out this video, which should be appearing on your screen right now. If you want more conversations that challenge nostalgia without disrespecting it, subscribe, become part of a community that takes this music seriously. We're not here to tear down the records we grew up with. We're here to understand them more deeply. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.